Welcome everyone to the next Cassandra Kubernetes SIG. Here we are today, gathered here today to talk about Cassandra Kubernetes. The agenda I posted, a little minor agenda that I posted in the Cassandra Kubernetes Slack. I think we'll just kind of stick to that for now and see where it goes. First things first, right on the top of the docket, let's get a status update on the CAS operator merges that are happening. I will start. I did see Jim's not going to make it today, but I did see some of the tickets in the GitHub getting cleared up. But who can take this? Who can take point on this? Mr. Bradford.
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of tickets being cleared right now because we're in the process of releasing 1.5.0 with a whole slew of features added to it. So that those tickets getting closed is related to those efforts, and I believe that should be done this week. Top of the stack there, scale down is now implemented and working. There's this really cool feature where if you're using the pod template spec and you want to modify existing containers, that's a thing you can do now. Previously, you could just add new containers to the pod. Now, if you specify a container with the same name as one of the containers that's already there, say the Cassandra container, it will merge that with the container that the operator builds. So you can, for instance, one of the big features that this allows is if you're trying to add a secret through a volume, previously you would have to add that to the pod, then create an init container to copy it to the config directory so it's then available inside the Cassandra pod. You don't have to do any of that nonsense anymore. You can just modify the Cassandra container directly, which is a big win for a bunch of workflows. So that's, like I said, that's going on right now, and I expect it to land here shortly.
Cool. Cyril, I'm going to put you on the spot. I just did a quick check. Hang on, I'm going to do a share of my screen. We have a, this is my favorite part of this tag, that it's actually orange. But Cyril, if you could give us an update on some of these. I know you and Jim had been talking, but maybe you can just give us an update.
Yeah, so spent some time on creating those tickets, those issues, in order to get some of the features that we have on CASCOP ported to CAS Superior in any ways. So yeah, I've been talking to Jim, and he talked to me about the PR that you had pending before it got merged regarding the pod template spec. Otherwise, I was going to create more tickets for that. So we're good on that side, especially to be able to, yeah, for instance, like Tom was trying to change the configuration, the number of tokens, change things that you need to do at some point, and that you can do in the init container, I guess. So yeah, we put something that's spec. It's perfect. You can override containers as init containers. Still have to specify no containers if you don't override the containers, but yeah, this is just, I don't know if it's been put to the, added to the documentation though, but that might be something to look into. Yeah, I created a bunch of tickets, one for the plugin. So Jim was interested in the CASCOP plugin, and our users are. We were also talking about being able, maybe through the plugin, to be able to create a cluster by just filling, answering some trivial questions, and being able to have the deployment file, the object created on the fly. But other than that, yeah, for all the operations that we do, we use the plugin to trigger cleanup and many other rebuild and many other operations. Also the cross IP issues that we talked about last time. That's when I raised the fact that we need to use IP, and then when IPs change, then we get an issue if they get exchanged among the same cluster. we released yesterday the 1.0.1 of Casca with the backup, fixing the last issues that we had. But yeah, we have a working system to back up and restore data. So you have obviously an issue for that one. Um, Regarding the ability to add sidecars, maybe that one is not relevant anymore, as we have the pod template spec where you can specify them. So this should be, I don't think this should be valid anymore now that you have merged the PR that I talked about. Maybe um, Christopher, I don't, yeah, this is Christopher, your first name. Yeah, Chris can talk about it. And the last one is the one I'm looking into right now, which is how to set labels on a rack, at a rack level to be able to specify where we want, I mean, uh, those nodes to be allocated. We use what is called the network Calico labels to do it, or to decide if we want to have valid IPs. I think that one is at the top level though, but the one at the rack level is needed for us to decide where to put the nodes and avoid having them to be in the same rack when everything goes wrong. That's most of it, I think.
Yeah,
So we,
what I can say is that the last one is the most important for us right now. So we wanted to basically say that we could try to do a pull request for this one on your code. Is that if that's something that could be, it's a good way for us to get into your code and maybe participate. So that's something
By
we
all
can.
means. And I +1 that. I ran into this problem this week. I was running multiple Cassandra clusters on multiple kind clusters, and I was so lost. I was like, where are the labels? So, yes.
yeah, and if inside of that ticket, the 292 ticket, I think we're all on the same page. I'm a big fan of the CASCOP approach on this, and I think we put out there maybe to have a field called selector, or I think there's the naming is not important, but just a freeform set of key value pairs instead of that zone parameter would be preferred. So.
Okay.
Just a general question. I think I see a lot of good, we have some good interactions going here. Just a sense of timing. And Bradford, this may be a question for you. I know there was this all right, we were kind of run into, okay, merging code plus 1.5. What do you think the velocity is here to get these merged, finished, merged in? Are we looking at weeks, months? What do you think?
Yeah, so originally the goal was to have the 1.5 release pushed out. I'm actually looking at GitHub right now. It says 28 days ago. So we are a bit behind on that one, and 1.6 is past due by 5 days. And given the timing in relation to KubeCon, the 1.5 release, like I said, is happening right now. I wanted to have that done before KubeCon hit, and obviously KubeCon is happening right now. So that has not happened, but like I said, it's happening this week. 1.6, I'd love to see that make its way out, and that'd be a way to close out the year. I think that's a reasonable expectation, and a number of these tickets that are on display right now are candidates for that, and we can apply the 1.6. Actually, you can actually see many of them already have that 1.6 milestone tagged on them.
The reason I'm asking is because, and I'm just putting my project hat on, the ASF big picture is we have 4.0, who's God only knows when that will ship, today, next week, I don't know, a month from now, but it's coming. And we're down, I think we're looking at an RC here pretty soon, which means in just thinking about the health of the project as it relates to Cassandra and Kubernetes, having things starting to come together is going to make the 4.0 adoption story in 2021 a lot better, I think. And I know it's like, okay, we're putting goals out here, but I think it's a good goal to have the final consolidation, to get the CAS operator donation underway, along with the 4.0 shipping around that time. It's just going to make our lives a lot easier for operators out there that are going to be looking at doing a lot of things happening next year around Cassandra, moving to Kubernetes, adopting operators and things like that, plus upgrading to 4.0. Let's make it easier for them. It's probably just
That's a tall order without Kubernetes. Helping people upgrade from 2 and 3 to 4. I mean, that's a tall enough order right there.
Exactly. But and I don't know how CAS operator is going to manage this. I talked to, and John, maybe you could throw this in there, but like, here's the thing that I think about. When we go from 3x to 4, that will be a in-place upgrade. But you know how this goes. When you go from minor, or when you go from major to major, you run upgrade SS tables. And and that's one of the things we should probably put out there. It's like, this is an operator topic right there. So John, maybe, or Chris, you just inhaled, so go ahead.
Yeah, it's so the life cycle for any Cassandra upgrade, right, is you get your binaries switched out ASAP, and then you roll around and do your node tool upgrade SS tables. One of the things that we initially looked at for upgrades was, do we call upgrade SS tables or not? And right now, the way that the code is written is, you can change the version number and it will roll through your cluster, pushing out new binaries. It does not call upgrade SS tables, and that was by design. And I'd love to have an open conversation about this, because I'm curious, from an operator perspective, what's the expectation? Do you expect it to call upgrade SS tables, or is there a preference for the operators to decide when that happens? Operators being the human operators in play here. Because if I were operating a Cassandra cluster, I'd want to choose when I take that hit to rewriting all my SS tables, instead of having it happen immediately after the upgrade. Maybe that's what would happen for my cluster, but I'm curious, other Cassandra users, what your expectation is and how you would like to schedule that sort of thing.
I was just talking to somebody this morning about difficulty of Cassandra upgrades, and I want off. I don't want to do this stuff anymore. And basically, I said, look, you have everything automated. What are you complaining about? Like, well, I have to deal with, when I say I, as in his team, have to deal with all the different steps. They have to wait for the upgrade SS tables to finish because it's a fairly large cluster. And it's like, I wish I could just press a button and be done with it. And so that's kind of from the business, like, management standpoint of, why is this so difficult? Now, I think from a technical operator standpoint, I think it's actually important to be able to flip that flag and say, yeah, do it automatically. I'm just testing this through, or wait a second, this is an important cluster. I have to make sure performance is not going to be impacted, blah, 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 blah. So I see it both ways. From a business standpoint, nobody cares about the underlying steps involved. They're just like, and the reason that's important is because, I mean, you guys all know this, right? Somebody's got to pay the bills, and those people pay the bills. So I think the ease of use is important. That's just, I mean, this is just like a fresh conversation this morning.
So Rahul, a lot of that is like, I think of like when we do any upgrade I've ever done on cluster, go to the release notes. It gives you, like, when you upgrade from this version to X version, from previous X version, whatever it may be, to new version, you may need to do these things. And I think that's what you're saying, but I also am like advocating, well, the release note should be codified. Is that crazy talk?
Let me add something, because I agree and disagree at the same time. So we made the choice in Cascade to have a parameter called autopilot. And when it's on, it does everything. So we do an upgrade. It sees that this is an upgrade and does the upgrade SS tables after having started the Cassandra. But in some cases, we don't want it. So we can set it to false. and then it doesn't do it, and it's up to the user, to the user of the operator to do it. That could be the case, for example, if we want to do an upgrade, but we want to be able to roll back if anything wrong happened. After upgrade SS tables, good luck. So, and we don't want to lose any data or things like that, or have to restore. So yeah, that's what we chose. We were wondering also if it was possible with at least minor version to just update part of the cluster and not the whole cluster. But for that, they need to be able to communicate. So that's also why we wanted to be able to prevent it from happening. So it could be fully automated or not, depending on who are the users.
There exists a field for Canary deployments, Canary upgrade right now, and that will limit any changes to a single stateful set or rack. And I think there's also a request out there to make it so you can specify the number of nodes that are Canary upgraded, whether that be for a configuration change or a binary change. I guess with the autopilot field, it kind of functions in the same way. You're intending, or you're hinting, saying, hey, you can just go ahead and make this happen, or let's take this slow. Maybe we want to decide when and how we run upgrade SS tables. Do we want to put all of this behind a single flag, or i.e., when I say behind a single flag, like the autopilot flag, or should the flag be more specific just to something like upgrading SS tables?
Tom, I'd love to hear your point of view on this, because you're going to have to deal with this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think my initial reaction is that, like, I'm totally okay with, our team as humans running upgrade SS tables rather than having it happen automatically with the operator. I like the idea of that as sort of the long range goal, right? Like I think eventually the Kubernetes operator should handle all these kinds of things, but I don't see that as like a high priority item starting out. Upgrades are infrequent, and that it's a big deal when you do it, and so like having humans drive some of those steps, to me seems totally fine. So I do like the idea of sort of moving towards that as a goal, but making it optional in the meantime, so that if we want that extra control in terms of when it happens, we have that.
This is a pie in the sky idea, would be to have the original SS tables, upgrade them somewhere else, and then swap them per container. That would be the pie in the sky idea, because then you know what? That would be cool.
I love that.
We have the power.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's doable.
It's the same thing as a Canary deployment, right? Like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Patrick.
No, that's totally doable.
There's so I think it depends on the environment too. So like your dev and your test, I mean, okay, we're upgrading your cluster and it's going like running through with upgrade SS tables afterwards automatically. You got a huge +1 from me. I agree with the sentiment that you had there, Cyril, about the or it might have been Rahul. I'm sorry. The people that are paying the bills versus the people that are on the hook should latencies rise, right? Like, because upgrading SS tables isn't free. It takes time, and it will impact your query performance. And that's the thing is, people don't care. They want it to be on autopilot until things go a little sideways. And by sideways, I don't mean it's broken. It's just, why are our latencies up? Oh, we're in the middle of an upgrade, and we're running upgrade SS tables during our peak time because it's automated. So yeah, okay, this is helpful, and I think we have a couple of directions. There's certainly a desire to just say, hey, when this upgrade rolls out, if Canary upgrade is false and upgrade SS tables is set to true, it's just going to roll through and make it happen. And then a separate flag for maybe environments where a little bit more care is needed, or maybe there isn't that operational headroom to just YOLO through the cluster and upgrade the SS tables.
I think this is going to definitely be a thing that will get put out there and discussed a lot if we can, because it's going to be a lot of, I like where Tom is like, it'd be a great idea, you know, having it is good, but you know, it's like self-driving car. Keep your hands on the wheel. Because you don't want to,
Sleep.
because you don't want that Tesla driving off the road whenever you're not looking. But I think it's something that if we're thinking about like the evolution of Cassandra in a data center, a future of people running SS tables seems pretty bad. It just seems like not progress. But it has to be, we have to be sure that it's doing the right thing. I like the idea of canaries. I mean, whenever you have a cloud deployment, how can you do this differently? You know, can you snapshot files, do a canary upgrade, you know, create a separate data center, do a quick test? I mean, there's a lot of options we can codify that I know that some operators do already. And how does that in turn into, and I would also bring up the observability aspect of this. You know, what when we do that, how do we expose those metrics to show that it worked? All right, cool. If there are any other CAS operator topics to talk about, John, you got anything?
No, I'm good.
All right, moving on. Some of you may know about this thing called Cassandra. So yeah, we just released all the code, but I think everyone in this call knows what it is, except for you. Rahul. Did you know? I knew. Just act like you did. No,
I've got eyes and ears everywhere, Patrick.
Yeah, you do. It was like, it was the biggest secret, not secret. It was just like, we're trying to like get it assembled, but I was telling everybody about it. Like, here, you want access? So Cassandra is out there. You know, and we're really excited that, you know, that there's been a really strong response from the Kubernetes community. That's actually been the strongest response. I mean, the Kubernetes community is like, oh, thank you. I didn't want to touch Cassandra with a 10-foot pole. Now I feel okay, which is great. But this is a Cassandra community call. And, you know, I think I just want to express this very clearly to everyone while I hit record, is that, you know, our intent is this to be a community project. This isn't just, you know, this isn't a DataStax product. We you know, we started the energy and we put some, well, let's put it mildly. John, he worked 25-hour days for the past few weeks to make this ready for KubeCon. But it's really, this is a beta. And I think like these discussions we just had are the kind of discussions we should have and then codify. And I don't know how much more I can say. I hope we come together as a community to make this work. And I'm really interested in your input on how we can make that happen. So how can we do this as a community?
I think the greatest thing about Cassandra is it answers a call to how do I get started with Cassandra on Kubernetes. From an end user perspective, you know, the complainer, right? The complainer perspective, oh, okay, cool. This seems easy. And everybody may not end up using Cassandra, but somebody who's new to Kubernetes may come across this and say, oh, this is kind of cool, right? So I think the question I have for the folks that contributed to this is that what is the linkage between, you know, Cassandra and Cass operator, in that how much is it going to be tied to this and how much is it going to be separate? Right, that's the main question that I have.
You're not alone in that question. And so to be clear, I've had many people be like, so what's happened at a CAS operator now that we're talking about this Cassandra thing? All right, hold on. CAS operator is a core component of that stack.
Yeah.
What we
Yeah.
the ethos of Cassandra is not this is the only way that you run Cassandra on Kubernetes, or even the you have to use this stack. What we've seen inside of Kubernetes and inside of this landscape is it's all about composability, right? What do you want to use for metrics? What do you want to use for backup? What do you want to use for repairs? Do you need some of these things? Do you want some of these things? Does it matter? Do you just need a Cassandra operator, right? And to be clear, we're not replacing CAS operator. That's not the goal here. The goal is to say the CAS operator solves this vertical really well. It can run the heck out of some data centers and handle your node and your rack life cycles like a boss, right? Cassandra is thinking of not just that tree in the forest, because as human operators, right, we're not just running Cassandra, right? We have to, the core database, we have to think about everything, the entire operational portfolio for running a system like this, with all those components I mentioned, your metrics, your repair, your backups, your restores. And so what we'd like to see with Cassandra is not just you have to use Prometheus, you have to use Grafana, you have to use Reaper. What we want to see is, hey, I think that maybe the Instacluster backed backup solution is kind of the way that I want to operate inside of my DCs. Or, you know what, I am monitoring everything else we have with New Relic, wink, wink. So maybe I want my metrics to be in that system. And so the idea with Cassandra is right now, yes, there are single components that do these operational tasks. And the goal is for you to say, all right, developer day 0, day 1 with Cassandra, they're like, hey, I need this installed. And maybe if I had some sweet graphs to tell me that it's not broken, that'd be awesome. But I'd love for the person to come with existing clusters and existing knowledge and existing tools already inside of their environment to say, hey, this is what I need out of my Cassandra stack. I don't need just Cassandra. I need it to integrate with the backups that we already have codified across the org. Maybe I need log aggregation to go to this specific sync, right? And to have those hooks inside of there, whether the Cassandra operator spins up the basic stack for that, like we have with the monitoring right now, or say you already have monitoring in place. You can bring your own, say, this is the endpoint, I need this agent, make it happen. And those hooks exist. So that's the goal. And I think I answered your question in a really long roundabout way. CAS operator's not going away. It does its job really well.
I mean,
and we want to leverage it to do that job, but not have its scope creep out into the whole big picture. We want to compose this system in a way that's helpful for the community at large.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, CAS operator is part of this, right? Like that's what I was saying. Like, you know, I get what you're saying. I'm on the same page. I totally get it. In fact, you know, some ideas that I've had, like for example, what you just, you know, you're describing, like 100 different people, well, maybe not 100, 10 different people said, you know, how do I do Cassandra if I don't have Ops Center? And I'm like, you got to get Medusa, you got to get Reaper. So I just put up a README. I call it Cassandra Toolkit, and people like say, oh, this is actually helpful just to see this stuff. Now, it's not push button, I get everything at once. So I think the best practice of using Cassandra on Kubernetes, I think that's kind of the maybe the mission, right? This is the way you do it to get started, and then you can customize it. Ideas that I've had are, let's say, you know, another DataStax project, Stargate, you know, let's go ahead and wrap this in here, you know, or, you know, if I want to use REST-based.
What an amazing idea.
You know, like I want to use REST-based for a caching layer, right? It's already a built, you know, for basically caching REST calls. Or maybe I want to add, you know, Kong to this. So I think it's a great contribution to the community, and it has to just be clear when somebody goes to CAS operator, we should say, hey, this is what you should do to get started if you know what you're doing. But you can also just go here and use this Helm chart to get started. I think there should be some linkages going back and forth. Because if I'm going to CAS operator and I don't know about Cassandra, then I'm missing out on so much knowledge that you guys have put in here.
Yeah, that's a good point. Making sure that there's awareness of what other tooling exists in the space and how you can kind of operationalize this. I think it's important.
So I'm working on the next blog post for the Cassandra blog, where we're going to have to build Cassandra to publish this blog post, because that's what the steps involve. Sorry, I hate that process. But I'm going to be talking about Cassandra. I'm going to be talking about, you know, the decision to start merging stuff, and, you know, what's like, for example, Bradford, you had responded on the mailing list about, hey, these are the cool things inside Cass Operator, and then Cyril mentioned, here are the things that I think are making sense. So I'll have a little bit of an update for the community. I'm talking beyond that. It's important to have these systems to say and refer to each other, if not for Google's sake, for everybody else's.
So I think that the thing that I would love to hear some input on is how to make it easier to contribute. You know, that is kind of the lifeblood of any, and this is a struggle we've always had in the Cassandra project. You know, is how do you contribute? All the code is on GitHub right now. We're using GitHub issues, but I'm really interested in hearing, like, you know, Tom, your team has already contributed a critical update on the website. But what makes it easier for people to contribute? And I'm thinking about things like the roadmap, like, hey, these are things that we really want to make sure that as a community are in there. Being able to report bugs, you know, are obviously important. Changing documentation, but how can we be better at this?
I mean, I think, you know, we're happy to work through GitHub issues and pull requests. I mean, I think having all that in place, you know, especially now with sort of the big push, all these are open source tools. They're all sort of unified. You can find them. Like, I think that's you know, an excellent way to do it. You know, discussions on the dev mailing list are also good, but like, I don't know, to me it feels like the infrastructure is all there. Like I have no problems with working with, you know, any of those repos.
Sorry, go ahead if you're not done.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you know, I think about, like, you know, I'm looking at sort of like the Cascade compatibility issues, and I'm wondering, like, yeah, like some of them are you know, kind of largish tasks, and yeah, like, you know, like I don't know that, like, I would be in a place where I would want to, like, you know, grab one of those and start tackling it. And so yeah, so trying to figure out ways to, like, you know, break things down or have things that are, you know, sort of more approachable to start with, might be helpful.
So yeah, so I think those tickets are just a start. Then it can be split in multiple tickets if we think that there are different components, even in the core, that must be updated. What we did on Cascade, for example, is create some issues where we found minor bugs or minor changes that we wanted to do, and just add labels there saying, you know, it's good as a starter PR, or this is something that is approachable by anybody, we think. So I think that could be a way, you know, to tell people that they don't need a certain level to create a PR on that. Because I mean, among anyone, know what needs to be updated, and how difficult it is. And for someone that doesn't know it, could be complicated to know exactly where to make those changes and how long it's going to take. So if, like, just looking at a label or anything like a level, they could know that it's going to take 2 hours or a day. I think they could just start to take a look at it instead of just leaving because it seems so huge.
Right.
I'm sorry, were we still talking about Cass Operator, or are we talking about Cassandra contribution? Because I think those are like two different things.
I think everything that Cyril just said, though, is applicable to either. for what it's worth. I know one of the things that GitHub does is for issues, they have like good first issue tags to help just kind of signal, hey, this is something that you could jump into as a first experience. Part of it's also just kind of a nurturing approach to community and to new contributors. I think some communities do that really well, whether that's through automation or just the character of how you interact with new people. Says a lot and can either be super welcoming or cold. I think is the flip side of that.
Yeah, I think we've learned this in the Cassandra project, the low-hanging fruit tags, LHFR tags, which were sometimes they weren't so low. It's like rebuild gossip. Well, how's that a low-hanging fruit? People tried though, let me tell you. But it's important because when you're looking at this massive, overwhelming thing that potentially, being able to get directed into something besides documentation. That's always kind of the lame, like, oh, why did you contribute to the docs? I think we have a really interesting opportunity to have meaningful, small contributions just because of the composability. Some things I would love to see are like choices in integrations. Like ingress, you could throw a rock and hit 10 ingress implementations. So why not, bring your favorite one. Observability tools is yet another topic in there. I've talked to the OpenEBS team. They're interested in bringing storage choices. So, I think that's going to be a direction that we can really embrace and go for as a community is having a concise set of choices, and none of them are bad. It's just because none of them are, there's no monopoly on the truth in Kubernetes. It's composable.
I think storage is very important. I don't know if you have an idea of which storage to advise to people when they go to Kubernetes. That would be a very good start. We have the problem because we like local storage, but our ops don't really like it too much. They're a bit scared of what Kubernetes will do when the node goes down. So I don't know. We have some projects to have non-local storage, I would say, but none of them are really good. So I don't know. You talked about OpenEBS. Is that something that people have tried, or maybe that's an interesting subject to look at quickly?
It's certainly interesting, and I've been talking to some people, enterprises that are using people like Portworx, and they're doing the integration there is fascinating because you can do scheduling based on where your storage lives, which you can certainly take that perspective. I think it's kind of fascinating to think about. It kind of turns some things on its head for me as I try to travel down that rabbit hole. And so I think storage is in a similar spot to Ingress, where there's a bunch of solutions in that space, whether they're OSS, vendor-backed. I've personally done testing on some vendor-backed storage where it's all ephemeral volumes, but they back up to a object store every 15 minutes and have their own CSI implementation for restores, so you can use your ephemeral volumes. And that was really cool. But you're also saying, if you're going to go that route, you got to pay them some money. Like it's not something that you can just jump into right away. And you can see what other projects have done. Like the Rook project has, I think they have a Cassandra operator, but they also have storage backends too for software-defined storage. So there's certainly a space to be opinionated. I.e., if you're on a specific cloud provider, you might want to just use the block storage from the cloud provider. Versus if you're super latency sensitive, well, maybe ephemeral volumes are more interesting, and it should be guidance. There should be guidance around the pros and cons of each, why you would use one over the other, and a sane standard. So like what you see with Cassandra is it's using, John, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's the standard storage class, which is in every Kubernetes, there is a standard storage class, whether that's local path provisioner on K3D or K3S, or if you're in a cloud provider, it's EBS or PDSSDs or what have you. But that should certainly be configurable, because different Kubernetes clusters are going to have different storage classes and might even have more than one, right? Depending on the needs of it. So yeah, I'm definitely seeing where you're coming from there, Frank, and that's something that should probably move closer to the top of the list in regards to getting some guidance in that space.
All right. Well, I didn't really have anything else on here, unless there's another topic around Kubernetes Cassandra that we need to bring forward. Does anyone else have a topic outside the agenda that I posted?
Well, I just had one quick question, sort of following on the discussion. Like, so it's been really interesting to hear you talk about sort of like the composability as a goal, because I really kind of thought of Cassandra as like a very, you know, opinionated, curated packaging of sort of like, you know, these various components. And I think, like, you know, in terms of the operator, like one of the exciting things that's happening here, right, is sort of like unifying this development effort around Cass operator. And I wonder, like, do you think something similar might happen with, you know, like backup restore, right? Like, do you think there will be more, you know, movement effort behind Medusa as a result of Cassandra, as opposed to like InstaCluster or some of the other ones? Like, do you see like the choices made by Cassandra as sort of driving development effort around these, you know, sort of chosen components, or is that not really the goal at all? And really, like, we want to be able to support, you know, any and all choices for these different features.
In my mind, and I'd love to get some validation here, whether I'm right or wrong, I think that the initial experience, and for somebody that is new to Cassandra and may or may not have Kubernetes experience, I want there to be community-backed and really sane defaults. And when I say sane defaults, I don't just mean like items inside of configuration files. I mean components to fill the gaps in this operational, production level Cassandra cluster is how I like to word it. It's not just Cassandra, it's everything around it. So that is a core goal, and that is opinionated, right, on where we think as a community people should be going. But not everybody listens to guidance, and the flip side to that is they might already have a bunch of tooling already inside of their environment that they have to conform to or need to conform to. And if you don't have flexibility there, your project isn't applicable, and that might be okay in some cases. So to answer your question specifically, I think that there is room to be opinionated and to drive development in specific components while still being flexible over time and how you deploy. For what it's worth, I think there's a way to just straight up say, I do not care about repair. Do not deploy that as part of Cassandra. And that is, if you want to do that, go for it. But I tell you what, the default's going to have repair turned on. And I think that's reasonable. And the way that we've taken to describing the configuration inside of the Helm charts is we talk about the specific verticals that need to be supported, whether that's repair, backups, metrics. If you want to turn any of those sections off, we don't say this is the Reaper section. We say this is the repair section, and then inside of that is a subblock for Reaper. And if a new amazing repair option comes along, or an old one that's just janky, I saw somebody was talking about the Cassandra Tickler the other day in Slack. Like, yeah, there can be a spot for that in there. That's not going to be the default one that's selected. If you want to contribute that, more power to you. And maybe if it evolves to the point where it's a viable option to be the default, that's something we can look at over time. But yeah, I get your question, but B, the end goal of having a community, I don't want to say blessed, but a community-backed way of doing things. And I think consensus is going to drive us in that direction.
What I'd like to add to that, Chris, is that I agree. The slavery of choice right? Like you have so many options on how to do something. You want the freedom of commitment. This is it. This is what you should commit to. This is an easy one. Just let's try it out, right? But on the other side, I mean, it's a Helm chart. You can add anything to it. And, you know, I was imagining like, this is the core Cassandra thing, but if you want, here's another one that has, you know, Kafka and a Spark, you know, cluster also on it. Common use case. You know, here's one with Pulsar and Spark on it. Here's one with Pulsar and Flink on it. So I think having one core one, we should definitely have one that's opinionated, because new people don't know what they're doing, and we should tell them how to do it. If they get advanced, we should say, here are some other flavors that you could do. And if you're a person that understands Helm, it's like Lego blocks, right? You just keep adding stuff. And, you know, we just worry about giving them the tools, and then everybody else can do what they need to do after that.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need to be opinionated, and I think Reaper is the good example. I mean, everybody use Reaper, so don't just put Reaper on. And the backup restore is not something simple in Cassandra compared to other solutions. So we need to have something that works. We tried it. We made the first version within Stack Cluster, and it is working actually, and which is good. It has some limitations, and we would like those limitations to be left behind when Medusa comes in. So I would be very happy, and that's why we open an issue on the CASCOP, on the CAS operator, to know what's the status of the Medusa integration and what's the roadmap on it. And I think that's very important for the operation people to have a backup solution that works before talking about having another one. Just let have this one work, and people will be pretty happy with it. And we got the same with the metrics. What are the metrics that you put in Cassandra? Because that's we personally on CASCOP, in Orange we have the Insta cluster exporter for Prometheus. What is the metrics that you have? I mean, I haven't looked at your GitHub, sorry, not yet. What are the metrics that are exported, and that's an issue for us as well. So let's be opinionated.
Let me share some numbers with you. This will help seal up our opinions a bit, because we did a survey. We did a workshop this week. We had for KubeCon, we had 4,000 people sign up for it. 1,000 people showed up. It was a lot. And let me show you a little something here that'll make this will help your opinions. So we asked a very simple question of the attendees, and this is 321 responded. How much of you have experience with Cassandra? That is a massive bulk of people that have no idea what Cassandra is. Rahul, there's your number. Like,
yeah, I know this. I work with Cedric. He tells me this, like the type of people that show up to his workshops.
Yeah,
it's like they haven't graduated college yet, and they're like trying to get a job, and they're just like, what can I learn now to add to my skill set? You know, like this is where they're at.
Well, here's the next one that was really interesting. Look at, yeah. Yeah, we had some folks who've been using Kubernetes for a while. So
that's cool.
You know, the interesting thing, and I think the mission that's really interesting that's forming around Cassandra is there's a lot of Kubernetes operators out there that are looking for a data solution for Kubernetes that doesn't suck. You know, and yeah. I mean, I don't need to tell you all, Cassandra's awesome. However, what do you tell the people that have been running Kubernetes and they get that, but they show up like this? And I think this is, you know, where Tom is, like the same defaults, you know, what do we have to be opinionated in some regard, but give them enough room that when they are comfortable, we have experienced operators out there. These are SREs that do this all day. So I thought it was an interesting thing to share. Just really telling.
That's great. That's a captive audience that here's the competition, right? There's the folks that are willing to do Kubernetes, are getting into it, you know, as part of their cloud transformation. And they come across the data layer. I'm in the middle of something like this right now, going from on-premise to Azure. And, you know, I had to map out 4 options. One that did not include Cassandra and the cloud native. And we ended up deciding to do Cassandra on VMs for now, and the rest is Kubernetes. And then at a later time, like, you know, we'll evaluate Cassandra and see if it'll do the job. But the adoption of Kubernetes, I mean, this is like 4 years ago, Kubernetes won the war, right? But like, that's the technical war. But then in the last couple of years, it's like, oh, we should use Kubernetes. Like, do you know what it is? Like, you want to use it? Like, what do you know what it is? So from the business conversation, they want to use it because it's cool. So they're just pushing down to people. It's like, oh, let's use Kubernetes now. And so that can be something that we can take advantage of, you know? But what I mean by competition is, the competition is cloud native, Cosmos, managed key spaces, Spanner, Bigtable, right? Against basically having somebody manage, you know, a cluster for you, you know?
Yeah.
Right. So that's really, I think that if we make it super easy, it's not going to be as much of a competition.
Rahul, let me ask you a question. Who owns Kubernetes data in Kubernetes right now? What's the default answer? That's probably the right answer.
Yeah, that's what I don't think there is anybody that owns data in Kubernetes right now.
No,
etcd, that's it. etcd owns data.
It just turned into a top level project. You're right. But yeah, and I think it goes more towards, and let's be fair. Who owns like stateful services inside Kubernetes? Who's got that figured out? So, you know, I think this is going to be fun. It's the Wild West, but you know, we've been working on a database for 10 years it was cloud native before cloud native was cool.
It's interesting to see some of the components that are inside of Cassandra become cornerstones of running a distributed system inside of Kubernetes. You look at things like your service meshes, and they're talking about running systems like Gossip, and you're like, yep, we've had that for a while now. It's interesting when you get to a certain number of nodes, and Rahul, to your credit, the etcd there's a reason why Google switched from having the free control plane across a region to zonal control planes, and I've heard some horror stories about, oh yeah, we just put everything inside of Kubernetes resources, and that's our database now. I'm like,
I'm telling you.
Sure.
Good luck with that one.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I will say
they're definitely better than Zookeeper. So.
Oh, don't even get me started on Zookeeper, Rahul. I mean, no, this is not that call, but
there are people that are looking to make a very big impact in the way stateful applications are run. Stateful applications like databases are run on Kubernetes. It's a bit in flux at the moment. Some of the pieces are there, and they're kind of ugly. Stateful sets. They do a lot of things right, but they do a lot of things wrong when you think about them in the scope of a database. So one of the things that I'm hoping to do, and I'm trying to facilitate this, is we want to be impactful, not just with the Cassandra community and running Cassandra on Kubernetes. We want to be impactful in the Kubernetes community and running databases on Kubernetes. And that's something that is in its infancy right now. I'm trying to work through building those relationships with some of the big Kubernetes vendors and the people working on writing Kubernetes. So I hope that we'll have, as a community, a voice and driving the direction for stateful apps on Kubernetes. And I think having a pretty solid platform in the form of Cassandra on Kubernetes will add some significant credence to that.
I will add, I'm also on the TOC for Kubernetes, or for CNCF. So I get involved in that from time to time. That's the technical
agree.
oversight committee.
I think what Frank, I think you mentioned it, right? It'll come down to storage, because people will have different storage needs. You're talking about data and stateful services. Eventually, it's going to be, well, I'm using AKS, or I'm using EKS, or I'm using whatever. You know, my mama's KS. Like, honestly, there's so many Kubernetes distributions out there now that we have to make it super easy to say, sure, you can use your mama's KS as well. Here you go. I don't know where, I mean, I've known about MinIO for a while, and I don't know if I saw it on Cassandra, but I recently just saw it. That seems like a really promising cloud native like object store. And I think I ran across it specifically because I was trying to find S3 alternatives. But what's your thought on that?
It's awesome as an S3 alternative. I run it at home personally. That's where we store all the objects at my house. We have a horrible internet at my place, so we.
I was gonna say, what kind of nerd are you where you have an S3 bucket at home?
Oh, it's multiple buckets. Thank you very much. But MinIO is legit. It's actually pretty cool, pretty easy to run, and
I can see it now. Yeah. Do you yell at your kids, "Who's filling up the object store?" I'm going to start charging you by the minute.
It's monitored. We know. No, but yeah, I think having those options out there listed and how you would use them as an S3 alternative for backups, right? Or OpenEBS as a software-defined storage solution for Kubernetes, and how that would interact with something like Cassandra is a big deal. I'm a big fan of prescriptive guidance, and I hope we see that in the docs. I found it to be really useful with certain types of users. It makes it easier to say, hey, this is what you need to do to reach your end goal. And it's less of a, well, all these things exist and you can build that glue. Like, no, the glue's here. This is step 1, 2, 3. Boom, you got a cluster running on this setup. And I'd love to see that with these projects and with the documentation surrounding them.
All right, just time check. We're at the top of the hour. I want to be very respectful of people's time. I appreciate it. This has been a really cool hour, and everyone who missed it is going to be sad, but I will post the recording. I'm excited and encouraged by what we have going into the next year with our community. You know, 4.0 is cool, but I think where we're going here with Kubernetes is even cooler in the long run.
So, quick thing as we wrap, Patrick.
Yes.
If you are interested in joining the community for Cassandra, there are lists for that. It's all through Google Groups, and it's linked on the Cassandra website. So please check that out. Please join. I'd love to start some conversations around storage and ingress. I think those are two very hot topics that are a big deal, and it can be a bit more async than these calls. So please, if you could hop in there, I'd love to talk with you about it. I don't know if the Cassandra ML is the right place or not, and I'm happy to do it there too. So please, let's get the ball rolling there, because those are big topics.
Let's keep it in that group for now. I mean, it's pretty specific traffic around running Kubernetes. So, and I have a feeling that that's going to be not welcome in the Cassandra developers mailing list. It's kind of out of band. So let's stick it, keep it in the Google group for now. And links are on Cassandra.io, so you can get in there. All right, everyone.
I'm the second person on there now. I think Chris, you're the first person on there.
That's right.
But I think for storage that we need to make sure that local storage is good or not. I mean, that is an option, local storage. And I mean, when people have VMs, normally they have local storage. So why would they not have local storage on Kubernetes? That's my question. I mean, I'd like to go to the bottom of the local storage.
Yeah, and local storage is there, but how it behaves in the case of node failure is the big conversation. You're like, oh, I have local storage, or I don't. Like, some people don't, and all they have is software defined storage. So
it's same for VM. Or I mean, if you have a local storage behind your VM, you have the same problem. So I don't see a big difference. I mean, Cassandra is made for that. I mean, you have replication all over the place. So I don't know.
And in Cassandra 4, zero copy streaming, like bootstrapping, is so much nicer than Cassandra 3. it becomes a much easier conversation to have when you're not like, all right, well, you got a terabyte of data. You're going to be sitting there for about 8 hours waiting for your nodes to come up. With 4.0, it's like the line rate of the network card, which is awesome.
And transient replicas. Don't forget transient replicas.
I don't know enough about transient replicas, to be fair. I want to know more. Anyway.
Yeah, they're marked as
super
experimental,
cool.
but they're there. You like them? Okay. Yeah. Transient replicas are a big cluster problem, obviously, since it's from Apple. Yeah, I think it will have some bearing in the large Kubernetes deployments. All right, everyone. Thanks for a dynamic and engaging hour of power. And I look forward to speaking to you soon. See you on the mailing list. And thanks again for a great conversation.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Peace.
Thank you.